Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. As always, I'm Labi, and I'm joined here by Jacob. Jacob, how are you doing today?
Good, Labi. First and foremost, happy Orthodox Easter. Big holiday for the Greeks. I don't celebrate it because I'm not Greek, but for you, happy holiday.
Thank you very much, and yeah, shout out to everyone celebrating Easter this weekend instead of a couple of weeks ago was normal Easter. So
Yeah.
yeah. But we're still here bringing you another episode, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about this weekend in the world of sports. The biggest story is, of course, the NFL draft, and that is where we will start. And then, as the NHL season is continuing to wind down, I went back and listened to our picks at the beginning of the season, and we'll sort of go over that and give ourselves some credit in a couple of places, and then laugh at ourselves in a couple other places. And that should be a good bit of fun. But to begin, let's talk about the NFL draft that, of course, took place over the last couple of days. Of course, round one taking place on Thursday, and I'm sure that's where the majority of the attention always gets placed upon, particularly at that top end. And, well, I mean, let's just start with Jacob, your overall impression of the draft, and then also let's just talk about Trevor Lawrence at number one, because I don't think anyone was surprised, and we kind of knew this for kind of 3 years almost since Trevor Lawrence started playing as a freshman in Clemson.
I mean, the top 15, there was like 5 quarterbacks, and Mac Jones of the Patriots just hit that 15th mark. Top 3 quarterbacks. First one was Lawrence, who went to the Jags, and we had Wilson and Lance, and then we'll get to the other ones later. I thought it was a pretty good draft. I thought teams really made some good pushes. Maybe the Dolphins were the big winners of this one, arguably, because of how many picks they picked up. But yeah, good draft. I think a lot of teams should be happy with who they have, and I think the Jaguars have their franchise quarterback, as we all predicted that they would get in Lawrence. But I think there's a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of players that kind of went maybe a little bit lower than I would have thought they would have gone. But I was pretty happy with who the Bills got. I was pretty happy with who the Browns got. But overall, like, it was a good draft.
Yeah, like you said, very quarterback heavy. I think I remember them saying it's only the third time in the history of the draft that quarterbacks went first, second, and third overall. And as you mentioned, there were 5 quarterbacks taken total in the first round. And I'd imagine that the majority of them are going to go right in as the starter. It'll be very interesting to see what happens, and especially as preseason gets closer. What are the 49ers going to do with Garoppolo? Are they planning on keeping him, or are they trying to get rid of him and is Trey Lance the starter? It's very similar story in Chicago, of course, when they signed Andy Dalton, Red Rifle. They told him he was the starter. With Justin Fields now in the picture, I'm not sure Andy Dalton's a starter anymore. And then obviously the even bigger question in New England is Mac Jones the starter, or are the Patriots going to stick with Cam Newton? Obviously, they also have a quarterback that they drafted a couple of years ago, and I'm going to absolutely blank on his name, even though I shouldn't be blanking on his name because it's literally right there in the back of my head. It'll come to me when I think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, it's a big year for the quarterback. So let me ask you this: which quarterback do you think is going to have the best rookie year, and which quarterback do you think is going to have the best career overall? Because obviously those two could be different.
I think the best career right off the bat, best rookie year, will go to Zach Wilson of the Jets. I know it's on the Jets, and I hate the Jets. I see a lot more promise in him than Lawrence, and that's going to be a very unpopular opinion. But I just like the way he's played a lot more than Trevor does. But overall, I believe Trevor Lawrence will have the best career if he stays healthy, and that's the big question. Is he's on Jacksonville, and Wilson's on the Jets. Can they stay healthy enough to actually have a long enough career to be considered one of the best of their own franchises?
Yeah, and that's the big question mark. And kind of relating to that, the surprise pick I was most shocked by was the Bengals going Jamar Chase at 5 when literally everyone in the world thought it would be Penei Sewell just because, I mean, Joe Burrow literally died in his first year with the
Yeah,
Bengals. He had no
yeah.
protection, and they draft wide receiver over offensive lineman, which I thought was a bit surprising. Jared Stidham is the quarterback I was thinking about. I knew it would
There we
come to
go.
me on the Patriots.
You mean
Um,
Jared Studham?
yeah, exactly. Jared Studham. But once again, I think he was like a fourth rounder. So obviously, you got to think that Mac Jones is going to be slotted well ahead of Stidham. Yeah, in terms of who I think is going to have the best rookie year and in terms of the best career, this might be a pretty bold prediction. But I'm so in on Trey Lance,
Yeah,
which I
yeah,
know is a bit surprising. But let me just break this down a little bit for you. The last quarterback to come out of North Dakota State who got drafted pretty high is a man by the name of Carson Wentz. Now, we all know how Carson Wentz turned out. But if you look at what happened with Carson, I'd say it was a combination of a devastating injury and bad coaching that led to ultimately him to crash and burn development wise after what was arguably an MVP worthy season and a pretty damn good couple like year and a half. Um, so now my question becomes, if Trey Lance is that level raw talent, which I believe a lot of people think he is, clearly the 49ers think he is, the question then becomes, well, what is the system around him looking like? And the 49ers aren't necessarily seen as being like the best coached team, but they're definitely not a badly coached team. And I think that Lance will have an opportunity to develop, and I think he'll be have an opportunity to be surrounded by not only a more talented team, but by better coaching. And so I think that if Lance can get the development that Carson Wentz wishes he got, he can become a more complete player. So I'm really heavily invested in Trey Lance, almost more so than like a Zach Wilson or a Justin Fields, purely because of the fit. Just like how everyone is kind of assuming that Mac Jones is going to kill it in New England because it's Belichick and because it's New England. And I think so that's why a lot of people are really high on Mac Jones, and a lot of people are like, okay, yeah, Belichick's just going to turn Mac Jones into the next Tom Brady, which, like, I don't know if that's going to exactly happen. But to your point, you know, Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson are in spots where it has been very difficult to succeed as a quarterback.
yeah. And I think this year Zach Wilson will be okay because there's a new coach coming in who has a new system. So I'm hoping that Wilson. I don't like the Jets. My dad's a huge Jet fan. He really liked this pickup, and I said he's going to be a good pick as long as he stays healthy. So that's what he's got to do. He's got to stay healthy, and if he can stay healthy and make some good throws, I don't think the Jets' bold prediction have as bad as a season as people will think they will.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Also, another point is how these quarterbacks are going to handle losing for the first time. Because, once again, I'm not saying that they're going to struggle. You know, you could still have a somewhat successful season, but Trevor Lawrence hasn't lost more than like one game a year his entire life. Like, the guy didn't lose in high school, the guy didn't lose in college. He's going to a Jaguars team that could lose a ton. And
Right.
even if you say, oh, the Jaguars have a good season, like what do you think the best possible record for the Jaguars is? Like,
It,
even if
as a prediction, I'd say maybe 5-11, maybe 6 and
right.
10.
Like, my point is, like, let's even give them like the extreme benefit. Even if they go like 8-8, which I don't think anyone could see happening,
No
you're
way.
still losing as much as you're winning. So, my point is Trevor Lawrence is going to have to experience the first losing season in his entire life. You're talking about a guy who has succeeded at everything. And so it'll be very interesting to see how a guy like that handles losing for the first time. Because if you pull up his records, and like I'm not going to pull up his record, but like I'm going to just go on a limb and guess his record with Clemson was like 40-2, probably, right? Just like that was probably his record in high school. All of a sudden, he's going to lose more games than he did the last 5 years of his life in like 3 months. It'll be very interesting to see how he handles that. And like, I'm not going to go out and say same for Zach Wilson, but same for Zach. Like, I mean, you're talking about guys who are not used to losing, and they're going to do a lot of it. And that will be a big strength of a big test of how strong their character is.
Well, I feel like they know what's going to happen. I feel like they know at the end of the day that they're going to a team. They're all going to teams that really that did very poorly last year and are really in need of someone not to be good this year, but to be good in 4 years, in 5 years, in 6 years. And I think they realize that. And I think they don't have to. I think it's the same with Joe Burrow. He went to a team where he knew there was a possibility of getting hurt. He knew that this team was not going to be the greatest right off the bat, and he knew that it wasn't going to be easy. So I think these guys are going to go through the same situation where they're like, oh, okay, we're not going to do well for a few years. Remember, it's just a few years. It just takes some time to get ready, and we're not going to be in the basement for the entire career. So I think they realize that in the short term, it's going to suck. In the long term, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just a matter of committing to that long term process. Pivoting away from quarterback, something that I was surprised about, maybe other people less so, is that 3 receivers, a tight end and 2 wide receivers, got drafted ahead of Devontae Smith, who won the Heisman. Kyle Pitts going 4th overall, which I wasn't surprised about. I don't think a lot of people were surprised about. Like, the guy's just an absolute monster. He's probably the best player in the draft, not named Trevor Lawrence. So I wasn't too surprised to see the Falcons go Pitts at 4. But I was surprised to see Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle both go off the board before Devontae Smith. Do you think that is teams are worried about Smith being a smaller player, only being 6 foot like 170 or something, versus Waddle and Chase being more like traditionally sized wide receivers? And what are your thoughts about the Eagles trading up to get Devontae Smith?
Well, I think the Eagles saw what they wanted to see in him in college, so they were happy with the pick. I mean, I guess so. Like the game it is football, and the bigger you are, the better chance you have of not getting hurt slash being able to hold your own. I'm sure they worried about that, but at the end of the day, the Eagles got who they wanted. I'm really disappointed in Atlanta. I am getting a tight end instead of a quarterback to develop under Matt Ryan. Well, he's still got maybe a year or two left. I'm disappointed, and I thought that they could have. I personally thought they should have got Mac Jones. I think that's who they should have picked because he's got a great, or even Justin Fields, which we can talk about in a second. I'm surprised he went that low. Um, I'm disappointed, and I thought that they were going to do something productive instead of getting a tight end. Yeah, it's Kyle Pitts, and yeah, he had a great season last year, but they need a quarterback. Matt Ryan's coming to an end, and so the fact they didn't get one, it just kind of shocks me in a bad way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thinking behind it is they think that they can still they think that Matt Ryan still has a couple good years in him, which once again we can argue whether or not that's accurate or not. I tend to agree with you. I think Matt Ryan's definitely declining pretty quickly, and I don't think he has as long as maybe the Falcons organization thinks he does.
Yeah.
But with respect to the pick, you're right. It's very difficult because there were 2 good quarterbacks on the board that you could take thinking about the long-term future and sitting under Matt Ryan and developing. And I definitely agree with you. I think that could be very beneficial. I also think, though, is that people were looking at Kyle Pitts as like the best tight end prospect that has ever come out of the draft. And like we're talking about a guy who can play tight end, he can play receiver. Like they're just looking at him like a weapon. And if we see what tight ends have been able to do in this league. You look at a Travis Kelce, you look at a George Kittle, you go look at like Gronkowski on the Patriots type of vibes, and apparently this is a guy who they believe they can be comfortable lining up as a wide receiver as well. I think they just saw this guy is way too good to pass up, so I'm not necessarily disappointed in the Falcons. Like I totally understand the pick, but you're absolutely right. If a Justin Fields or a Mac Jones turns out to be an absolute stud, like top 5 quarterback in the league, there definitely will be some questions asked of the Falcons. I'm not necessarily going to call it a bad pick. I think it's a safe pick for them to go with Pitts because everyone just agrees how dominant of a player he is. But you're right; it would have been interesting to see if they went a little bit more bold. And your point about Justin Fields dropping, it is surprising, but it's also not too surprising because, like you said, there were so many good quarterbacks in this draft class. You knew that there were going to be a couple of them left out. You knew 1, 2, 3 were going quarterback. And then you look at Atlanta could have, but don't necessarily need to. Cincinnati, Miami, Detroit. I guess Cincinnati and Miami weren't going to go quarterback. Detroit, you can think maybe would, but obviously they wouldn't have gotten Jared Goff in return in the Stafford trade if they didn't feel comfortable putting him at quarterback. Then you have two teams in Carolina and Denver. Actually, and Philadelphia, three teams in Carolina, Denver, and Philadelphia who do have a quarterback, but maybe the fan base would have rather brought in a new one. But then once again, that speaks to, just how interesting the quarterback position can be. And so I think for Carolina and Denver, going with those two corners, I don't think is that bad of an issue. And you look at the controversy that Chicago has in get I believe they traded. Did they trade up? Yes,
Yeah,
they
they
traded
did.
up. They traded up. Of course, they traded up. They traded the Giants pick. Of course, I should have known that as a Giants fan, which I'll get into very soon. But yeah, they traded up, and they traded up a lot. They gave up their first and next year's first, and two more draft picks after that. So I think that Bears fans, it's. I'm not going to say it's Trubisky all over again because trading up to 11 and trading up to Trubisky went second, I believe. Like trading up inside the top 3 and trading up to 11 are two very different things, but you're still giving up a lot of draft capital to move up to 11. And so once again, the question mark is going to be if Fields isn't the best quarterback out of this class and you give up everything, it's like Chicago Bears all over again. What was your thoughts on Fields dropping, and what do you think about his fit in Chicago?
Who's Chicago's quarterback right now? Is it Dalton?
Yeah, it's Andy Dalton.
Not a bad guy to learn under. He's definitely been in the league long enough, and he has some experience going deep into the season. So I think actually, I was genuinely surprised he went so low. Um, but I think the Bears made the right decision in drafting him. I thought maybe Fields would have gone before guys like Jamar Chase or even Kyle Pitts if Atlanta picked him. But yeah, I think he'll learn pretty okay under the development of Andy Dalton. But like you said, if he's not the best quarterback and you traded all of that for him, you better believe that it's going to be like you said. It's a certified Bears moment, just doing something so stupid like that.
Yeah, but if it works out, it definitely won't look stupid in the future. So you're right. It's definitely a really bold pick. The last two quick things I want to mention before we get to some other big news in the NFL. Giants loved the trade they made to move down. Like they pick up a next year's first. They only move back 9 spots. I wasn't really too disappointed. The only thing I was kind of sad about is I kind of wish we maybe stuck at 11 and drafted Micah Parsons, who obviously went the next pick to Dallas, because I would have loved to have seen him on the edge for us as a linebacker. But once again, also, if it means getting all of that capital and only moving back 9 spots, I thought that was a phenomenal trade with the Bears. Then they use that 20th pick on a wide receiver, which I'm not knocking Kadarius Toney. He looks like a very talented receiver. He had a phenomenal year in Florida. But like, and this goes back to your question: do you draft best available player or do you draft need? And I think that obviously there's a fine line between both. I think that if you only stick to one of those strategies, that's probably a stupid way to go about it. Like, if you only draft need, but then there's a stud player available, that's probably not the smartest thing to do. But also, if the best available player isn't like a superstar and it's in a position where you don't need, like say the New York Giants picking up a wide receiver when you just re-signed Sterling Shepard and just gave Kenny Golladay a massive contract. I don't understand why we went receiver, especially when we have so many other needs on defense, on the O-line. Especially when three players that I really wanted as well went the 3 picks after in Kwity Paye, Caleb Farley, and Christian Darrisaw. literally in the three positions that we need help on: the edge, corner, and tackle. But I don't know, man. The Giants, just our draft record's been pretty shit the last couple of years, so I'm not really too surprised. At least we have two firsts going into next year. It's something. I don't really want to talk too much about just the Giants there, but that's my thoughts on the pick as a Giants fan. Um, Now, before we get into the whole Green Bay Packers Aaron Rodgers debate, which is the other big news. Just really quickly with the five quarterbacks in the draft class, we're gonna play start or sit. Are they going to be the starting quarterback this year, or are they going to sit? Trevor Lawrence, I think it's pretty easy.
Sit. No, I'm kidding. It's start.
I was gonna say, I mean, Gardner Minshew mania. What's going on with him? I'm telling you,
Yeah.
someone's got to trade for Gardner Minshew. He's gonna win them a Super Bowl. Zach Wilson. I think this one's pretty obvious too.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
that's a start.
that's a start. The next three are kind of interesting. Trey Lance.
Sit. I think they want to give him. I think they want to try and milk whatever they got out of Garoppolo. Which is interesting how he was part of that whole Rodgers fiasco. But I think they'll give it to Garoppolo and they'll give Lance a year. Maybe they'll put if they're like out of the playoffs or they're in the playoffs guaranteed. I think they'll give him maybe a game or two at the end of the season just to kind of see, or maybe a few games in preseason to see what he could do.
I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to say start just because I think that they're going to trade Garoppolo before the start of the season. I think that this shows that they're done with, not done with him, but more so committed to a new quarterback. So I think they're going to trade Garoppolo and Trey Lance starts. It'll be very interesting to see, though, what happens if they don't get rid of Garoppolo. Justin Fields.
Uh, Probably sit because they want to see how Andy Dalton could go.
Yeah, I think this is going to work out the way it worked out in Miami into his rookie year, where the first 4 or 5 games go to Andy Dalton, and then they make the switch, and Justin Fields becomes the starter like week 5 or week 6. I think they're going to do that because they told Andy Dalton when he signed that he was going to be the starting quarterback, and it'll look really bad on the organization if they don't fulfill that promise. So I think because of that, Dalton's the week 1 starter. I think Fields takes over by week 6.
Yeah,
Uh,
I could see it happening. Yeah.
and then finally, we have Mac Jones.
Probably going to sit. I believe that New England has said they want to roll with Cam Newton, but I can see if Cam have it like it's the same situation. Cam having a bad kind of start to the season, and they're like, all right, let's try Mac Jones, see how he does.
Yeah, I'm going to say sit as well on this one, although I wouldn't be surprised if they run like a Philadelphia Eagles type of situation where they, how the Eagles would put Jalen Hurts in because of his legs. I feel like they might do that, except the reverse, where, obviously Cam Newton is more of a mobile quarterback. They might do a little bit of sharing reps where Mac Jones does a couple like pocket passes and then Cam Newton comes in and they do some more like wildcat run pass option, like running type of stuff. At least I think it would be really cool to do that. I think especially if Belichick's the one in command of that, then it's going to be very successful. But I agree with you. I think they're definitely going to lean more Cam Newton, at least at the beginning of the season. But like you said, if poor performance, literally anything can happen. Which leads us to not draft talk, but big NFL news as well. Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to return to Green Bay. Your thoughts on that, and then your thoughts on his potential landing spots of, not sure San Francisco would be a spot anymore given they just drafted a quarterback at 3, but Denver and Oakland have also emerged as possible spots.
Uh, Oakland. Don't you mean Vegas?
Sorry, Vegas. In my mind, the Raiders are still in Oakland and the Chargers are still in San Diego. But yeah, sorry, Vegas.
Oh, this whole situation is handled so poorly by the management. There was. Did you hear about the trade? It was Garoppolo and like 3 first rounders for Rodgers, and they said no. And then Rodgers like, I'm not going to play a single game. I feel like San Francisco did that before the draft and decide whether or not they're going to need the quarterback. And then they're like, okay, not happening. Okay, we'll get a quarterback. Um, Oh man, Roger said he's not going to play if management's still there, and I definitely see him not playing. He's fed up with the team. They can't win. They haven't won a Super Bowl in so long, and he's been so good. He's been the MVP, no question, for the past few years, and they're not doing anything, and he's pissed off and he wants out. And the management said, "You're coming back," and he said, "If I come back, then it's not going to be with this team." He said he's going to go into retirement, and then sign with another team. Like, he's that pissed off. Before I tell my predictions, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. This just speaks to mismanagement in the Packers organization. I mean, when you have a star player, don't piss him off.
Yeah.
And this isn't there have been some people, and I think this is a very bad take, but there have been some people who are like, oh, you're under contract with the team, your commitments to the team, like, shut up and, like, just play if you're under contract. But, like, it's not, like, I don't think what Rodgers has been saying is unreasonable. It's not like he's a diva who's demanding, like, everything or anything that he ever wants. We're talking about a guy who has committed 15 years now to this team, has been a stud playing like an MVP quarterback for the vast majority of that time. And every single opportunity the Packers management has had to piss him off, they've pissed him off. They literally trade up to draft his replacement. They refuse to draft offensive weapons. They draft a cornerback again this year with the first round pick. They haven't drafted a wide receiver in the first round for Aaron Rodgers ever. Ever. And then with his contract situation, Rodgers asked for a contract. They didn't give him one. Then Rodgers even came back and said, "Okay, instead of giving me a pay raise or an extension, why don't you just give me the same contract that I had before? Just extend it by years, not by money." And they still didn't agree to that. And so, I mean, it's not like what he's asking for is unreasonable. He's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He's asking for some receiver to throw to and for some guaranteed money on a contract. That's not a really high bar for an MVP to be setting. The fact that you can't even meet that as an expectation, I'm not surprised Rodgers wants to fuck off. Especially when you consider the relationship he had with his previous coach before LaFleur came in. And now apparently LaFleur and him have a great relationship. But, I mean, do we have to go back and talk about the clock management that LaFleur showed in that NFC Championship game? And I think
No.
also, Rodgers has been in the NFC for 15 years. He's made it to one Super Bowl. Tom Brady comes in the NFC year one, makes it to the Super Bowl. I'm not saying that's a factor, but that might be a factor where he thinks I've been in this conference for 15 years and Tom Brady matches what I've done in one. I can't have that. I got to go to a team that is going to show me that they're taking it seriously to win. Because a lot of people were talking about this. The Pat McAfee show, there's a huge Packers fan on the Pat McAfee show, Ty Schmidt, and he was talking about him being a diehard Packers fan, talking realistically about his team. And he said, yeah, if you take Aaron Rodgers off the Packers, we're a below average team. That shouldn't be the case if you have a stud player. And I mean, not to make NHL comparisons, but how often do we talk about you have to give star players guys or they're going to be pissed off? We talk about how at least the Sabres made an effort getting Hall to Buffalo. Obviously that didn't work out at all, but like at least an effort was being made. I don't even see an effort being made to make Aaron Rodgers happy.
No.
In terms of where I think he goes, go ahead.
Before you continue, and then drafting Love, was it last year, was definitely not what Rodgers wanted.
Well, yeah, I mean, why you don't draft that's the other thing too. Like when we talk about drafting a quarterback with Atlanta, for example, and sitting behind Matt Ryan, no one's here talking about Atlanta being a Super Bowl contender, right? So it's okay to spend first round draft capital on the future because your present isn't successful. You're talking about a Packers team that made the NFC Championship game. They were one game away from the Super Bowl, and the Packers thought that the smartest thing to do was trade up to invest in the future. No, that doesn't make sense. You're one step away from the Super Bowl. You have to be focused on success now. In terms of where I think he goes, I think we talked about a guy like Justin Fields falling. I think a big example is you saw Denver came around. They didn't go quarterback. And there are rumors that Denver's really looking at potentially getting Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, we know what the Denver organization likes. They like tall, white quarterbacks with the big arm. I think
Yeah.
that Aaron Rodgers fits that description pretty well.
And if Von Miller is able to come back for next season, I can see Denver being a real problem.
And that's the thing. Denver didn't have that bad of a year last year, and they had a nightmare at quarterback, literally having to play a wide receiver at quarterback one game.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're missing their defensive captain all year, and they still did pretty well. I think they're a pretty well coached team. Um, I think that Denver makes the most sense. I think Denver makes the most sense.
I think I'm with you. I think if Rodgers does go anywhere, it is Denver, and I think Denver probably makes the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the only sort of shock to that is, but I mean, we're talking about the two favorites right now are Denver and Vegas. They're both in the Chiefs division, which
Yeah,
is very interesting. If
but they're
we
also
see
hold up, but they're
Mahomes,
also in the Bills division as well.
no, no, no,
Oh
no,
no, yeah, no, my bad. I'm
yeah,
tripping.
it's Chiefs, Raiders, Denver, and oh, I'm gonna get crucified if I get this wrong, but I think it's the Panthers also. No, it's not the Panthers. Oh,
So what?
as you can tell, we're not huge football fans, and I don't have the divisions memorized. Is it the Chargers in that
Chargers. I think
division?
it's the Chargers.
It might be the Chargers. There we go. We got there in the end.
Yay.
But yeah, I mean, but once again, I not to say that this is like everyone's just copying Tom Brady, because I don't think Tom Brady's living rent free in Aaron Rodgers' head the way a lot of people think he might be.
Mhm.
But Tom Brady leaves for the other conference, enters a division that has another elite quarterback in it, Drew Brees, and then goes and wins the Super Bowl. Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers moves to a different conference, same division with an elite quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. There are a lot of parallels there. A lot of parallels there.
You may be looking into this one a little too much. I think he's just going to go to a team that's desperate of a quarterback, and they're going to rally around him, and they're going to make a good playoff push.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to follow that news moving forward, and it'll be very interesting to see what ends up happening, and you'll hear a lot about it as the offseason rolls on, and then eventually we will get to a point where we can do some NFL predictions.
Quick,
Speaking of
quick,
oh, sorry,
hold up,
any
quickly
last
before we
words?
go. United versus Liverpool was postponed because supporter unrest at the Old Trafford.
Yeah,
Yikes.
there are protests going on. Manchester United want their owners to sell the team.
Whoa.
Yeah, because of the whole Super League thing that's going on. And of course, Manchester United's owners, the Glazer family, owners of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they don't like the American influence of the owners because they were trying to do the whole Super League thing. And yeah, so fans were protesting. They were on the field. And so the game was supposed to take place at 1:30, I believe, 1 o'clock. Anyways, it was supposed to take place this afternoon, and it got postponed because of the protests that are going on.
Rip. Anyways, that's what's going on over in Europe right now. Let's move to what we were going to talk about before.
Yeah, so I was going to say, speaking of predictions, with the NHL season coming down to the last 4 or 5 games, I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about some predictions, just because next week's episode will most likely be a fully dedicated Stanley Cup playoffs preview prediction, sort of just talking in depth about everything Stanley Cup playoffs. And so I want to commit more time this episode talking about predictions, and then talking about it next week, because I want to dedicate most of that time to talking about the playoffs rather than reviewing the season. Now, none of these standings are finalized, of course, but I think we have a pretty good idea of sort of what's going on in each division. Jacob, how much of your predictions do you remember?
Let me pull up the standings right now of the NHL, and I'll tell you. I'll go division by division, and I'll um kind of go there. Well, first off, let's start in the North. I had the Leafs winning this division. I still believe that. Yeah, I had the Canucks in second, and they're in last. Um, I had the Jets in third and the Oilers in fourth, and so I'm. The Jets are there. The Oilers are obviously in second. So, way to go!
You had the Flames in third,
Oh,
and
did I?
the Jets in fifth. We both had Winnipeg missing the playoffs.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, with respect to the North Division, We both have Toronto and Edmonton in the playoffs, which
Yeah.
is a
So
win. We also both have Toronto winning the division, which is probably going to end up being a win.
yeah.
We both had Calgary, which I was I was going to say one of the biggest L's for me was being so high on Calgary.
Yeah. Same with me being so high on Vancouver.
And then I was going to say I was actually accurate with Vancouver missing the playoffs. And actually, when I went back and listened to it, my initial prediction before I changed them, but my initial prediction was Vancouver to finish in last. And then I switched it and had them in fifth, still missing the playoffs. So I'm going to take credit for that. Uh, Obviously, not full credit because the reason they're in last is a lot of it is to do with COVID and with the amount of games in hand, they are probably going to pass Ottawa and finish in sixth. But I'm still going to take credit for predicting that they wouldn't come anywhere near the playoffs. But yeah, I think also I picked Montreal as the fourth
Okay.
seed, which obviously isn't finalized right now, but I mean it's looking pretty
Well,
likely.
Calgary's loss last night and Montreal's win is definitely probably a backbreaker for. They both have 6 games remaining, and I don't think it's going to happen for Calgary.
Yeah, so it looks like I'm gonna go 3 for 4. You're gonna go 2 for 4, which isn't too bad. And
Fifty
then the
percent is still a pass.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I wanted to give both of us credit for is we both picked Austin Matthews to win the Rocket Richard this year, which is looking like a pretty good lock at this point. So,
Well, yeah, Leafs only got 5 more games left, and the league doesn't have very many behind that. It's not going to happen for any other teams. Like Pittsburgh, like the Florida's only got 3 games. Who's behind him? Is it Rantanen?
yeah, I believe it's Ranton. He has such a big lead that no one's passing him in terms of goals.
Yeah, I think that he'll be the first Leaf to win it.
I think that would be, yeah, I think that's true. I
It,
think that's true.
it's a fact. It's not a question. It's a fact.
Yeah,
He'll be the first
yeah.
Leaf to win it, which is ridiculous. This is why. This is why this has to be the year. Matthews is playing like a monster. Marner and him are a cheat code. The fourth line is getting production. Spezza and Thornton have 12 points in 6 games. Like this is it. Like Campbell's playing out of his mind. Freddie will come back healthy, and a healthy Frederick Anderson is, if he plays to his potential, is deadly Frederick Anderson. This is the year they have to get out of this damn division and get into the finals, or I'm seriously gonna be drinking for months.
Yeah, well, once again, we will definitely see what's going on there. Uh, But yeah, I think for the most part, the North, given how unpredictable people thought the North Division would be at the start of the year, I don't think we were too bad with those predictions. Although obviously Calgary and Vancouver for either one of us being pretty bad. But the biggest L's that we took in terms of predictions, well, actually my second biggest L, I'll talk about my biggest L also at this division, is going into the East, where I thought that Washington would miss the playoffs. Um, as they stand right now, they're 2 points out of first place in the division, and they've clinched a playoff spot. So I was very wrong about that.
I can't
Um,
believe you said they would miss.
you said Boston would miss,
Which it
which
technically is still possible.
isn't as bad considering they're in the 4 seed right now. But I think what ended up happening is we both assumed Philadelphia would be in the playoffs, and we
Yeah.
had to pick another team to miss because of that. And so that's sort of the biggest L that we took in the East. Outside of that, we both have the other 3 teams correct. I have Boston, Pittsburgh Islanders. You have Washington, Pittsburgh Islanders. We were both wrong about Philly,
Oh
which I don't
God,
think
what
is
a
that bad of a take because I think the Flyers preseason were seen as one of the best teams, and they just, for whatever reason, absolutely
what a,
fell apart this year.
what a joke, man. Like what a joke that they were the biggest laughing stock. You can make fun. Oh, the Leafs lost 6-5 to Ottawa after leading 5-1. We clinched the playoffs. Ottawa won't even make it. This is a team who's supposed to win this damn division, and they got eliminated like a week ago.
Yeah, it was really funny. The Penguins clinched the playoff spot the same day the Flyers got eliminated, so that was a fun day for me as a fan to celebrate.
Yeah.
But speaking of L's, the biggest L I took in terms of predictions was I picked Carter Hart to win the Vezina.
Yikes! I said Vasilevsky, bro. Why'd you go with Carter Hart?
I was trying to be different. I feel like maybe sometimes I feel like my Penguins bias sinks in a little too deep. So I was like, I'll say this that way they can't accuse me of being biased. And then Carter Hart ended up in the minors at one point and just couldn't make a save to save his life, which obviously as a Penguins fan I'm quite happy about. But I think that's probably the worst prediction that I made was Hart.
Yikes.
Winning the Vesna, which once again I don't think was that bold of a prediction preseason. And then he just decided that he was gonna forget how to play goalie. Um, but yeah, in terms of bad
I got a
predictions,
question for you.
okay, yeah, let's hear it.
Do you think he should have at any point during his his flunk, he should have been sent to the minors to get his confidence back up?
I'm pretty sure he was first. I thought he was for
No,
a small period of
he
time.
never
Maybe I
went
was
to
wrong about
he
that.
never went to the minors. Do you think he should have?
Yeah, who was? I know there was a goalie that was sent to the minors for like a conditioning stint.
Are you
I just,
sure?
yeah, I always assumed it was Carter Hart. It might have been another goalie. I know that there was a goalie who got sent down. Um,
Let me check.
I'm literally Googling Carter Hart minors.
Nope,
Um,
he didn't go down this year.
no, he did not.
He should have.
He did not. Um, then I'm gonna absolutely blank on. There was a goalie who was sent to the minors for a conditioning stint. Oh, you know who it was? I believe it was. I believe it was Shesterkin on the Rangers.
Ah, okay.
Or
Gorgiev.
Gorgiev. One of the Rangers goalies went down to the minors on a conditioning stint, I believe it was, which ended up working out because the Rangers are still in the battle for that playoff spot. Um, and then yeah, in terms of other bad predictions, as we pan over to the West, we were both very right about Vegas, Colorado, and St. Louis being 1, 2, 3. I don't think you can take too much credit for that. That was pretty much a lock from the beginning. What's still to decide is I did have Vegas first. You had Colorado first. That's still up for grabs. Vegas is,
Yes.
as of right now, just ahead of Colorado. And then also you picked Colorado to come out of the West in the playoffs. I picked Vegas. That's really one of the big differences of which of those two powerhouses are going to get out of there. The thing that is very wrong. Obviously, we both have St. Louis in third. They're most likely, though they are going to finish fourth if they make the playoffs, which I
Yeah.
think they're pretty safely ahead of Arizona now, where I
Well,
think it should be.
they're only game and a half ahead of them, but it's yeah, you're right. They have 3 games in hand.
I think it's with the combination of games in hand. That's a pretty safe lead. The big thing is Minnesota. Now, I picked Minnesota to come in fourth.
I did too, I
You
believe. No.
you picked Minnesota to finish last in the division.
Oh, okay. Are
Yeah.
you sure last?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yikes.
Yeah. Because we were talking about how you picked San Jose to finish fourth, Minnesota to finish last, and I picked Minnesota to finish fourth, San Jose to finish last, which we were both wrong about.
Honestly, it was
Minnesota,
one of the Anaheim teams that was the LA teams that was going to be in last.
which once again, speaking of, I was wrong. I had the Ducks as a dark horse. I said they were probably going to finish. I said they were going to finish fifth, maybe pressure Minnesota for the fourth seed. The Anaheim Ducks are the second worst team in the NHL. I was very wrong about that. So there is that. But yeah, we were both, just to go back, we were both 3 of 4 in the East, 3 of 4 in the West. I was 3 of 4 in the North. You were 2 of 4 in the North. And then in the Central, it is still up for grabs. The 4 spot right now. We both of us had Tampa, Dallas, Florida, and Carolina getting out into the playoffs. Dallas is trying to fight Nashville for that last spot.
That game last night that they lost in overtime was a huge backbreaker.
Obviously, still possible for Dallas to get that last spot. Still possible for Chicago, I believe, to get that last spot even.
It,
Which one of
yeah,
the one of the big underdog stories, something that we were both right about was we both thought that Columbus would struggle this year and take a step back. We were right about that. Not to the extent that they actually did, because I believe they're last place in that division right now. But we were both correct about them taking a step back.
yeah. I thought they did pretty well at the beginning. They took a really commanding lead in that division, and then the real players came up to play. Hurricanes, Panthers, and Lightning. They all dominated the um entire division. Like you look at the top of that division, Hurricanes have a 45 goal differential, Panthers 27, Lightning 40. So it really goes to show that the teams that really deserve to win are winning. And Chicago, Yeah, maybe they're about a year off, but next year I think they'll come back swinging with definitely a good season.
Yeah, so I mean, all in all, like I said, still a couple of playoff spots up for grabs, but I think it's pretty safe to slot St. Louis in as the 4 in the West, Montreal in as the 4 in the North, Boston in as the 4 in the East, and then I'm still unsure about the Central. That's probably like the only playoff spot that's like really and truly still up for grabs. So I have the chance to be either 12 or 13 of 16 right in the playoffs. You'll be either 11 or 12 right of the 16 in the playoffs, which honestly I think that's a pretty big success. I'm gonna say that that's a pretty good run. And then the only thing that like the only really biggest mistakes that we made is you were really high on Philadelphia. You had them coming out of the East in the playoffs, and I
Yep.
was really high on Calgary. I actually had them coming out of the North in the playoffs. I that was my real bold take. I thought they'd take out Toronto. Obviously not going to happen, but all in all, looking back at our predictions, I think that they were pretty good, which is why I obviously want to make fun of us a little bit with our dumb predictions like Carter Hart winning the Vezina or Minnesota finishing dead last in their division. But for the most part, I think we're pretty credible when it comes to talking about hockey on this podcast. And, our opinions are pretty solid. Our predictions, at least, are pretty solid.
I mean,
So,
for guys who specialize in hockey, at least you'd want over a 50% success rate.
yeah, I mean, we're looking at 75 plus percent. If
I'm
it's
okay with
12,
that.
75% is 12, I believe.
Yeah,
Quick math. So
quick
that's not bad at all. And gotta gas ourselves up for making some playoff predictions going into next uh,
next week.
next week with the playoffs. Um, but yeah, I thought that was going to be a really fun look. Also, with respect to the awards, like I think Matthews was a pretty safe bet for the Rocket Richard that we both got right. We picked McKinnon for MVP slash Art Ross, which I mean, we just didn't want to pick McDavid. I think
Yeah,
was the
because
main reason we gave.
that's the easy choice to pick McDavid.
But yeah, I
But
mean, McKinnon's having a pretty solid year still on top of that. And then in terms of the Selkie, I really hope Crosby wins it. But
he should.
the more they talk about it, the more I think it's going to go to Barkov, which like I wouldn't be mad about it because Barkov probably
Well,
deserves it
he
too. But
deserves it. Don't get me wrong, but Crosby does too. He deserves at least one in his life.
yeah, and then you get a shutout for picking the most likely winner of the Vesna is going to be Vasilevsky, which I mean, once again, very safe choice. But I mean, if it's the
Surprise.
right choice, it's the right choice, no matter how safe of a pick it is.
Yeah. Who did we say for Norris?
Yeah, so you said Victor Hedman, which might still happen.
Just because
He
he's Victor
doesn't
Hedman.
yeah, because Victor Hedman, he doesn't deserve if the Norris Trophy does not go to Adam Fox or to Shea Theodore, like it should go to Adam Fox, which is once again nobody would have predicted Adam Fox to win the Norris preseason. Yeah, this is another L for me. I picked Alex Petrangelo.
Yeah, he's definitely not been at the standard level he was supposed to be here.
Which is surprising because I mean I was right about everything except for the defenseman who would do it because I picked Vegas to finish first and I said that they have a phenomenal shutdown defensive style. Their defense is phenomenal, their goaltending is phenomenal, and all that's been true except the defenseman who's been leading that has been Shea Theodore. It hasn't been Alex Petrangelo. So I was right about everything except for the player who would be leading the charge with that. Because I mean, you look at Vegas, like Leonard and Fleury and net, it's been absolutely solid. And obviously, it's more than just Theodore on defense. It's like their whole defensive unit is a big reason for the success of Vegas. I mean, I'll look at some of the box scores of their games, and they only give up like 16 shots a game, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, no shit, they won. No one can even get a shot against them, which is why I think Vegas Colorado is going to be a phenomenal series because it's going to be like the most offensive minded team against probably the most defensive minded team. And I mean, we were very right about that even come preseason, and that was sort of the difference in our picks because I think you very much went on the new NHL is very speed and attack driven, and that's why you're leaning Colorado. And I'm very much leaning on the traditional defense wins championships, which is why I'm leaning Vegas. And That's just another thing that, from a narrative perspective, from a how it's played out perspective, we've been absolutely spot on about. And it does look like it will be Vegas and Colorado fighting those, you know, tradition versus new wave sort of style of play in that what's going to be the Western Division final, you would imagine.
Well, yeah, it looks like right now that Vegas will play St. Louis, and it looks like the Avalanche in Minnesota will go off, which I think is going to be a great series itself. But no way Minnesota is going to beat Avalanche. So then we could have, if the hockey gods give us everything we want, we can see McDavid and Matthews in the second rounder, and we can and for the first playoff. Series, and then we could see Vegas and Colorado in the second matchup too. So that would be absolutely beautiful hockey to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like the perfect way to wrap up today is with about 4 or 5 games left in the season going down the stretch. Uh, a lot of seeding very much up for grabs. What playoff series are you most excited to see? What do you want to see in terms of first round matchups that are possible with the possible seedings? You talked about Colorado, Minnesota. I agree with you. That's one of the ones that I'm most excited to see. Minnesota actually play exciting hockey now, and it'll be very exciting to see them match up. I think this is like the one playoff series where I could actually see it being a very, very high scoring game. Now watch me jinx that and have every game be like a 2-1 defensive-minded trap game.
One
But I
nothing.
highly doubt
Yeah.
that. What other possible first-round matchups are you looking forward to?
If everything aligns and stays as it is, Toronto and Montreal. It's been over 30 years since that happened, and that is just what the league needs is a rivalry of those two teams.
Yeah, no, that would be phenomenal to see. And like you said, Toronto Montreal right now, if everything lines up, is very much on the cards. Obviously, Montreal could even jump Winnipeg and finish as the 3 seed. So it's definitely not guaranteed. But yeah, that would be a phenomenal matchup to look for. In terms of other matchups that I'm really looking forward to as well, um, this one is from a neutral perspective, I think going to be a good matchup. I want to avoid this matchup at all costs. Let me just put that out there.
You're gonna play the
If the
Islanders.
playoffs ended right now, it would be Pittsburgh Boston.
Oh, Boston. Oh, okay.
Which if the playoffs were to start right now, I don't want to play. I'd rather the Islanders and then the Capitals. I don't want to play Boston. I think that's our worst matchup. Um, I was gonna say Pittsburgh Washington, but they're 1-2 right now. I don't see a way in which that ends up being the seeding in the first round.
Right.
Um, and then I think, like the Islanders, I don't think a neutral hockey fan is excited to watch the Islanders play. Like, I'm just not. So it looks like it'll be Pittsburgh Boston or Washington Boston, and I think that that's going to be a very exciting first round, no matter what happens. We already talked about Colorado versus Minnesota, and then it looks like Tampa is gonna play Florida in a potential Battle of Florida in the first round. And we were both talking preseason. This is another prediction that I think we deserve a lot of credit for. We both said that we thought that the biggest threat to Tampa Bay this year were the Florida Panthers. And
Yeah.
it looks like they're going to match up in the first round of the playoffs.
I think that's a rivalry that really needed to happen. And I think there's a rivalry that people don't give enough credit to. It's the Battle of Florida, and it's going to be Tampa Bay obviously won it last year, but Florida's a different team this year. Like, what's going to happen? Like, are the Florida Panthers really going to give them a run for their money? And who's really the best team out of Florida?
Yeah, I know it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. I think that that's a way more even matchup than a lot of
Yeah.
fans are going to give credit for, just because I think Florida, like really one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated team in the league, just because I think Carolina's finally getting that respect because of the deep run they made last year in the playoffs, and now they're first place in their division. And so I think Florida's really flying under the radar. Like, I'm trying to look at like the other teams right now, and I mean, I think a lot of those teams get the credit that they deserve. I think Florida is probably the most underrated team right now out of all the playoff teams. Just because I'd argue like maybe like a Boston because they're in the 4 seed, but like people give Boston the respect that they need. Like give I'd say like a Pittsburgh because no one's been talking about them as like a cup contender, but like Pittsburgh's Pittsburgh, right? You can't
Yeah.
say that teams like Pittsburgh and Boston are underrated because like that would just be a lie. Um, Islanders get the respect they deserve now with the amount of years that they've been putting in, just consistently making the playoffs. So, yeah, I think Florida's really the most underrated team.
Yeah, and I don't think they definitely don't get enough credit that they deserve. They are an absolutely ridiculously good team. Like Barkov deserves a sulky, and no one will even know who the heck he is. Half the people won't even know, oh, who's Barkov. Like he's so good.
Yeah, no, he definitely deserves a whole lot of credit. He's been not just like sulky defensive play. He's been putting up monster points as well. Anyone who has him in fantasy will know that Barkov was a very good investment in your fantasy draft this year. But once again, we want to sort of leave some more like of those predictions and seeding matchups to talk about next week. And so we are also almost approaching an hour. So are there any last points that you want to bring up today about hockey, about anything else going on in the world of sports?
I think we'll save it for next week. The hockey talk. It's gonna be we'll have the predictions and the playoff status finalized next week, and I think it'll be fun to make predictions off that.
Yeah, exactly. So keep your eyes posted for next week's episode. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be an important one, talking about the NHL playoffs. Just to wrap up this podcast, because we got some comments talking about to bring up some more Formula One. So very briefly, today's race took place. Lewis Hamilton wins again,
Okay.
but I mean, we've been seeing Verstappen won the last race. We've been seeing a lot more of a balanced fight at the front of the field, but it does look like Mercedes has gotten quicker since the last race, which is going to be a problem. It looks like they've recovered a lot of their performance, and it looks like they are the fastest car again. But Verstappen was really giving it to the Mercedes guys, at least during the first half of the race, and then it looks like once Mercedes got onto the hard compound tire, they found their groove again. So that'll be very interesting to keep up as the races go on. It looks like Sergio Perez is a Red Bull second driver. They found the stable driver that they need. He finished fourth, which is that's a good position for the Red Bull second driver, given the struggles that they've had with consistency in that second seat for the last couple of seasons. And then also, I just want to give a shout out to Lando Norris in a McLaren. He's been absolutely phenomenal. His first three races, fourth, third, fifth, which is about as good as you can do when you're not in a Mercedes or a Red Bull car. So Lando Norris has just been absolutely on fire to start the season. And then from a Canadian perspective, Nicholas Latifi finished the race for the first time this season in 18th. So that's something.
He finished. He finished.
And also, Lance Stroll struggled in this past race after consecutive points finishes in the first two races. Missed out on the points in this third race, but his team, the Aston Martin team this season, have been struggling severely. So I think just him getting points in those first two races was an accomplishment. I think that a lot of people are starting to give Lance Stroll the respect that he deserves. Obviously, when your dad owns the team, there are always going to be talks about, oh, you're only on the team because your dad owns it, because you're rich, you have money. And once again, to some extent, that is obviously very true. But he's making the most of his opportunity. He's definitely there on merit now, and he's definitely proven that he can be a good driver. Last year his teammate was Sergio Perez, a very good driver. He's at Red Bull now, and he was able to match Perez, and he was outperformed by Perez over the course of the season. But there were times where he was the better of the two drivers, which I think he deserves a lot of respect for. And obviously now his teammate Sebastian Vettel, four-time world champion, obviously Vettel, a lot older now, he's struggling for confidence, he's not performing well, but you're still beating a four-time world champion consistently, which is only going to improve your reputation if you're Stroll. And I think the last quick thing I want to mention with respect to that is, now that there's a guy named Nikita Mazepin on the grid, which I think I've talked about on the podcast. Of course, he's the Russian pay driver. His dad owns his team, or has invested heavily in his team. And yeah, no one in Formula One likes him. He's just not a good driver. Two, his dad is like the reason he's in the sport. Three, he also had there's sexual abuse allegations against him, which are pretty well documented, considering he posted it on his own Instagram story.
Wow.
Yeah, before he took it down, and like didn't really apologize too well. I don't think it was handled well at all. So he's a pretty hated person, and he's just been awful to start. Crashed out in his first race, I believe. Crashed out in his second race,
I
and
think
then
he
he
crashed out in a second. Yeah.
finished dead last, a full minute plus behind his teammate. So he's showing that he doesn't deserve to be here. And that's why I mean give Stroll the respect he deserves, because obviously the money and his dad owning the team definitely factors into him getting here in the first place. But now that he's here, he's proven that he deserves to be here, and he's putting in points performances where Mazepin, is clearly only here for because of the money, and he is showing that by being a minute slower than everybody else. And
I
so
mean, you got to give credit to these guys. A lot of people, same with NASCAR. It's like, oh, it's just a bunch of guys who drive in cars that go and so yeah, it is. But these guys are driving at speeds unfathomable to you that you probably never hit in a very very dangerous situation. So credit to all these guys, except that Russian dude because he's just a jackass.
well,
Doing
yeah.
going out there.
Yeah, and I mean, like again, it's very obvious when he's a minute slower than everybody else. Where it's like, okay, it looks like there's a talent gap here. If you're a minute slower than everybody else, you're a
Yeah.
minute slower than your teammate who's in the exact same car as you. Like at that point, you start to question just how like does this guy even deserve to be here? And also he got a penalty in this race because so when you're getting lapped by the car, like when you're getting lapped by a car, you're supposed to get out of the way to let the car through
Yeah.
because you're not racing the car if he's lapping you. And so he didn't get out of the way properly for the when Perez was in first place and like blocked his path and forced Perez to slam on the brakes in order to avoid crashing into him, which is just amateur shit to do. So
It's also a dick move.
yeah, like he came into this season as a villain, and everything that he's done in the first three races has only
Solidified.
solidified that
Yeah.
view of him just like not like just being like it takes skill aside, like just not being a nice person and not
Yeah.
being
Like
a likable person to cheer for.
if
Like
you come into the season as the antagonist or and people don't like you, you do everything in your power to kind of change that narrative. But he's doing everything in his power to keep that narrative. So
yeah, and it's like we said, it's on the racetrack stuff. It's certainly to a way more important extent off the racetrack stuff. Um, I mean, once again, like we don't have to talk about all this stuff because we do like to focus on the field stuff. But when this off the field stuff happens, it is important to at least acknowledge that it's happening and to hold people accountable. Like I'm sure more information will come out, and that's why we're not talking about it today. But the whole situation with the Vancouver Canucks now and Jake
Jake
Virtanen, and
Buchanan, yeah.
I mean, once again, if you read the story, it seems very credible to me with the amount of detail and like just like it's just
It's upsetting. It
yeah,
really is because
yeah,
like the fact that people do this behind closed doors and get away with it, like if no one had talked about it or if she hadn't come out, then we would never have known this, and that's just pretty awful to be honest with you.
yeah. And obviously it's a lot, it's we're taking steps to the point where we're in a situation where more people are comfortable coming forward
Yeah.
and being able to share that story, which I think is good because I don't think we would have been in a situation previously where this would have even come to light. But
Well, go back 10 years. This never would have come out.
exactly, which is why obviously it's still upsetting, and I'm sure when we like once again we obviously don't want to talk about things until we know all of the information and sort of everything gets out in the open and everything, and like whatever ends up happening from it comes about. So I'm sure there will be more details about that moving forward. But yeah, I just wanted to give a quick Formula One update for those of you who are interested in following the sport or who are, who have been commenting, asking to talk about it a little bit more. So yeah, that's the Formula One talk. Just to quickly wrap up, unfortunately, the Canadian Grand Prix this year canceled again. It's getting replaced by Turkey. That's just to do with the Canada government being very strict with what's allowed to happen in Canada. And we talk about all the Canadian teams only being able to play other Canadian teams, and we see with like the Raptors and TFC having to play their home games in Florida, I don't think anyone's particularly surprised that Canada's not letting an entire Formula One, paddock come in and race in Canada. But obviously, as a Canadian F1 fan, it's disappointing. But I guess from a North American perspective, they're adding an extra race moving forward next year in Miami. So there will be 2 American races next year in Austin, Texas, and now in Miami. So if you're an American Formula One fan, there's some good news, especially given that the American team Haas is going to finish last place this year. So with that,
Yeah. Nice.
yeah, I mean, I have to throw that in there. Although, are they really an American team if their major sponsor is Russian and their driver is Russian and you don't want to be associated with him anyways. But yeah, with that, we thank you for listening to another episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. Like we said, we will look forward to seeing you join us next week. You don't want to miss the Stanley Cup playoffs preview episode. It's going to be a big one. But until then, thank you again for the support. If you're watching on YouTube and you enjoyed this, feel free to give us a like or a comment. That's much appreciated. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review or share the episode if you enjoy it. It's great to continue to get more support and continue to reach new audiences. But until then, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.